Boom. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time of day it is you are, and whatever spirit you are in. My name is Samuel Davis III, and I am the host of Uplift Our Community podcast, powered by Bridge Visions. Today, we're talking about something that sounds positive on the surface, but may not go deep enough to truly change people or communities. Tolerance. For years, society has pushed the idea that tolerance is the goal. Tolerate different people, tolerate different beliefs, tolerate different lifestyles, tolerate different perspectives. But here's the problem: tolerance can still create distance, because tolerating somebody doesn't necessarily mean you respect them. It doesn't mean you value them. It doesn't mean you understand them. Sometimes tolerance is just silent discomfort with better manners. And in today's world, we've got people living next to each other, working next to each other, scrolling past each other every day, while still deeply misunderstanding one another. This episode, we're asking, what's the difference between tolerance and understanding? Why do people fear perspectives outside of their own? And what happens to a society that learns how to coexist but never truly connect? This conversation is about empathy, identity, fear, communication, culture, healing, and what it really means to see another human being. All right, family, let's discuss. Well, we're going to start off with that one right there. What you think about that, Benji? What you think about what I said?
Personally, for me, I don't understand a lot of things about people in general, right? So I tend to like tolerate everything, right? Because I really don't, right? Because like I don't understand why people doesn't have drive. I don't understand why people doesn't want, to thrive, right? I don't understand. But sometimes, I have the same tendency. So for me, I don't want to like I really don't understand the circumstances of what they come through, right? I live in Texas, right? I get along well in general. I tolerate a lot of things, but I don't understand why people like guns. I don't understand people who shoot guns, right? Because I hear guns everywhere, right? I'm like, I don't understand that stuff, right? I don't understand. So one of the things in Texas in general, we go boating a lot, and I love the quiet boating thing. But if you go to Texas Lake, it is full throttle party, right? This is like in the hill country. People are blasting music everywhere and things like. I'm like, what's the point of that? I don't understand it. So I stopped going there because of that reason, right? Because things like that is tolerance. It's just kind of those things. No different than a lot of people.
I hear that. I hear you. Gordon, what do you think about the subject matter for today? Tolerance versus understanding. What do you think?
It's interesting how you put it because um, if one just says the word tolerance, I often think that it's a good thing. I think that it's a way for us to, as you mentioned a couple times, I think to coexist, right? But I think that tolerance can also be a form of like avoidance. If somebody is doing something or being a certain way and another person tolerates it just to avoid conflict, to avoid the challenge, the conversation, the potential fight, right? Hopefully words, fights of words, right? Then I don't think it's necessarily a good thing. I think we kind of need to lean into those challenging interactions, those challenging moments, with some kind of level of trying to understand. So I almost think the tolerance to be a good thing requires the understanding, but understanding is the challenge, right? We come from very different points of view, different walks of life, different perspectives and cultures and all of that. And for one to understand somebody else that has a very different upbringing is hard. But to tolerate, you just kind of have to suck it up, bite your tongue, maybe, to tolerate. So tolerance is not maybe always a good thing. Tolerance should lead to understanding, hopefully. And that's kind of what I was thinking as you were speaking.
The gist of that thing is, what is the difference between tolerating someone and understanding? And I think when you came up, you said at the beginning, you don't understand why people feel a certain way about certain things. For me, as a Black American, and I got to jump right into that, man. I am not I'm not part of what we would consider the dominant society. I am not what you would consider the what do they call them? WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male. Is that what they call it? WASP? Is that what they say? I am not that person. I am not in that position, and I never have been in that position of power. I've never been in that position of privilege where I can sit back there and I can just say, hey man, I've always been on the bottom caste, whereas those in the dominant society have been in the upper caste, and they've been able to just walk around, do what they say, no repercussions, no feelings of backbiting, or no one's gonna no repercussions at all, period. It's easy to sit back and say, oh man, why can't people just love one another when you're on the bottom? Because we ain't getting no love. There's no love coming my way. But up top, that top percentile, those people, let's just say the billionaire class, and I'm just going to throw that out there. The billionaire class doesn't see no way at all to relate to us at all. Not at all. It's possible, unless you got a comment, Benji.
Yeah, no, it's pretty much the same. Like my ex, is American, right? She doesn't understand why I struggle with being around some of these things, right? It's no different. Like if you come to my neighborhood, Sam, a bunch of redneck gonna look at you, they have guns, you're gonna feel uncomfortable. It's different, right? It's like you mentioned, you've never been in this situation, right? So it's like it's hard to deal with. And especially the people it's like the rich people, especially the 1%, they've been taught a certain things. We don't know how to do that, right? Things like how you navigate like some of these conversations with finances and people and things like that. It's like, things like that. It's like no different. It's like, you look at Michael Jordan, he can do all these things. Well, we can't do those things, man. It's like you can teach us how to do all that stuff, but we can't hang, 1 second in the air, things like that. There's a certain level of ability that they have that we just don't. And so things like that. And my friend told me the same thing. And it's like, one of the things I have is incredible drive. He's like, that's the reason you grind through a lot of stuff. People doesn't have that drive. And I never understood that. And it's like always the same thing. I told Brian, it's like, hey, you see that yellow trailer I show you? That's what drives me. I don't want to go back to that yellow trailer. So people have different scenario, right? Things like that. In Texas is the same thing. It's kind of like, like the thing is like what I'm becoming more realization is like, hey, are we doing this to feed our ego? Are we doing this to feed our soul? I told my granddaughters the other day, it's like, you're doing all this, right? I know where you're going. We made that same choice. But just be aware. Ultimately, that's not going to fill you. That's not going to feed you. Things like that. Being the 1% is great and all. But if you do all that and you hurt people, it's at some point it's going to bother you. I don't care who you are. It will bother you that you take somebody else's livelihood away. I hear all this story about people like the renter and the landlord, making all this money, and I'm like, at some point you're gonna pay the karma will come around, things like that for sure. It always does, right? You see the Epstein of the world in jail now and things like that. You haven't seen the Bill Gates of the world yet, but at some point it's gonna happen. Everything have that balance itself. But yeah, I will tell you in Texas, it's pretty clear. It's like there's certain neighborhood I can't even go. I'm much more comfortable in honestly in the redneck district because it's my people. I go to the Kingwood Country Club and shit. I'm like, You guys are full of it. You bunch of BS. You're a pretender, meaning that they didn't make their own money. They got money from a trust fund or whatever it may be. Never work a day in their life. They don't understand what it is to do all the labor and that people struggle with. But yeah, I definitely. But yeah, when you come to Texas, Sam, you definitely got to make sure that you're in the right neighborhood.
Well, here's something that I do want to ask that this is what I'd like to ask to you, Gordon, based upon what we just got through talking about. Here's a kind of a question: have you ever felt tolerated but not truly understood? Tolerated but not truly understood. And I'll say I'll use myself in this one as a start, because let me pull this up right here. I've been in places and locations and areas where when in my professional capacity, when I would speak to someone and I would say, and they would come up to me and they would say, "Oh, you're in law enforcement? Oh, I don't want to hear nothing you got to say. I don't want to hear nothing you got to say, man. You can't tell me nothing. I'm from the streets. I did this, and they don't want to tolerate. They don't want to hear. They're not willing to. They're not willing to understand that my point of view. That, hey, I came from where you came from, got into law enforcement, and willing to go out there and have this perspective. I'm trying to pass it on to you, but someone else, they might not hear it. So we using that example, have you ever felt tolerated and not truly understood? And that's you, Gordon.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and as I was thinking about it, I was just thinking that that's been something that I feel like I've experienced a lot throughout my whole life. You know, and so a way to look at it is that, you know, my dad is from Mexico and my mom is white American. And although I grew up here in the US, my household has always been Mexican or Latino, if you want to call it that, because my mom was an only child and my dad had a decent sized, good sized family. And so all of my, you know, my generation, all my cousins and all of that were all Latino, and I don't have, like, with my mom being an only child, I don't have any white aunts, uncles, cousins for that matter, at least not directly, you know, in that immediate part of my family, I guess, if you want to call it that. And so, but you first look at me and you don't see the Mexican, you don't see, you know, most people are surprised when they realize that I'm Mexican, or most people are surprised when they realize I speak Spanish. And so my opinions and my perspective on things tend to surprise people. People tend to think that they know what I'm going to say before I say, and then are surprised that I didn't say what they thought I was going to say, or that I didn't see things the way they thought I was going to see things. And so many times I'm kind of, before people actually really know me, people will kind of brush me off, you know, so just another white guy or whatever for that matter. And it used to bother me quite a bit. Like, I used to feel like I need to prove something. I need to maybe throw a little Spanish in there just to catch people off guard. And I'm way past that. I don't even worry about it anymore. I mean, I was recently, you know, working in the community and working in a very Latino setting, and found out later that other people were asking if I was like a police officer or something like that. Like, what was I doing in that setting? You know, what was my role there? And I don't, you know, to me, it's like, okay, it's into, like, I automatically, I wasn't a member of the community. I must have been somebody from the outside, and the first thought was police officer or something like that. And so I think I'm often tolerated and rarely understood. You know, my tight circle or my close circle is very tight, very small, and those are the ones that understand me, and they're not a whole lot of them, right? And then that's fine. And then with the rest of the people that I might interact with, will judge by looks, and then that's fine too. Like, I don't get upset. It doesn't bother me. This is the world that we live in, right? And so for those that do only tolerate me and don't understand me, there's not much I can do about it, and it just is what it is. I think, if all of that makes sense.
No, it definitely makes sense. The interesting thing to me, the perspective from you, you walk in, and you have two personalities. You could be one or the other for you. When I walk in the door, I am a black guy. There is no distinction. They may think maybe he could be Caribbean, he could be from the continent of Africa, but no matter what, he's relegated as being referred to as black.
Yeah.
Whereas you walk into a place and you get the dual personality where they could think that one thing of you, and that would almost really be a trip for me, because to me, I think sometimes I can be a little mischievous myself. and I say mischievous in a good way, because I would try to push that thing every once in a while. I'm sure. Have you ever tried to push that? Like, let me go in here and act like I'm a white guy and go get a little better service? Or have you, honestly, because I know I would have tried it at least somewhere along the line. Have you ever been in that position where you had that opportunity?
I have. And real quick, regarding the two identities that I could potentially take on, that's definitely true. Like, I could come in and just jump into a Spanish conversation and not even speak English and be completely comfortable. But I think people's perception of me doesn't have that duality to it. People's perception of me is automatically, oh, he must be Russian, Italian, some kind of maybe Eastern European or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then regarding pushing it, I will share an experience I had. So when I was younger, when I was in my 20s, I used to work for McDonald's, and I worked for a franchise. So my boss owned all the McDonald's in Oceanside, and then started to expand and purchase other restaurants. And he bought one down in Del Mar. Del Mar is like maybe 20, 30 minutes from where we are. And he sent me and a team of people down there to kind of go through that transition and take over the restaurant and all of that. And for the first couple months, I did not speak any Spanish. And all the employees there, most of them, 99% of them, did not know that I didn't speak Spanish. And so it really opened my eyes as to the little conversations that would happen around the so-called boss that was there, that they assumed didn't understand what they were speaking. And then little by little, months into it, I started to speak more and more Spanish, and a lot of people were kind of caught off guard. And so, but as far as pushing it like that, I think that's really, off the top of my head, that's the only time I could think of it. I actually use that in that way, I think.
Hold on, let me remove this. Let me mute that there. Okay. So with that being said, I was going to say something, and I want to kind of bring us back on what Benji said earlier. Benji, being that you are of Asian, you are considered the model minority. So in Texas, you got a great place. There aren't that many Asians in your area, but I guarantee a bunch of me and my folks come around that way, neighborhood's going to change a little bit. They're going to have a different attitude or demeanor. They might not, how you said you can walk into your neighbor across the street and look at all his guns that he's got. Guarantee I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't be able to do that. Now, with that being said, we got Robin. We got Robin. He hasn't been here in a while. And I'm going to ask him: have you ever felt tolerated, but not truly understood in your position?
Well, I feel that all the time. I mean, that's a perennial. I feel that right now. That's a constant feeling. But it has nothing to do with race. For the most part, there are things that I want to do in life and that I'm trying to achieve. And I don't want to derail the conversation because I just came into it. I don't want to derail it into non-racial stuff if that's what we're talking about today. Oh. But in my case, race has never really been an issue. Now, as far as being a secret Chinese person, in the same way that Gordon was, secretly Hispanic. Yeah, that's happened to me quite a bit because most, I don't look Asian. I don't look Chinese at all. And especially to an Asian person, they just can't even believe it. And so there are times when they don't realize that I speak Mandarin, but it's never really been a situation the way Gordon had it, where there's a hierarchy where people, the only time anybody doesn't really talks, maybe somebody says something about me in Mandarin, not realizing that I understand them. That pretty much has never happened, ever. They're always shocked that I do speak Mandarin, but nobody has ever been. I guess I'm not that interesting to people who speak Mandarin. Now, in Korea, that happened all the time.
Oh, definitely.
Well, I'm glad you see it, because it's usually barmaids and people who work at nightclubs talking about how good looking I am. And I'm actually not kidding this time. It's actually because in my younger days, if you can kind of picture how I looked when I was younger, it had nothing to do with me being some handsome guy. It had something to do with I had a particular look that Asians really like. And if you try to actually picture, like, cartoons like anime, if you're going to draw a superhero, you always draw them as good looking as you possibly can, right? I mean, Superman, Batman, all these guys are all good looking, right? Captain America. Well, if you look at anime and all the superheroes in anime, and you just picture how I might look like that, with black hair and a younger face, they're drawing me. So I happened to be the kind of almost like the poster child for what they thought of as being a good looking person. So I heard that a lot. They're like, oh, hey, go get a drink for the good looking guy, and so I would get that occasionally. But as far as the original question in general, like, do I feel tolerated but not fully understood? Oh, I really don't think anybody is fully understood. I mean, I don't understand you guys 100%. I don't understand. And it's not about like, oh, you had an experience and I don't understand your difficulties or the troubles that you went through, but I don't fully understand your motivations and your thought processes and what drives you, right? What drives you to do the things that you do, and your tastes. I mean, some of you might like liver and onions, and I don't get that. But I tolerate it.
That's the thing. What we're talking about is the difference between tolerating someone and understanding. So,
well, I think that's almost like come on, that's a given. I mean, what's your favorite color? If it ain't black, then I don't understand it, but I tolerate it.
Okay.
I mean,
So, okay. Well, with that being said, then I did have a question that in along those lines. Just a second. So with that being said, I had a question I was going to lead right into it, man. I'm sorry, I just lost my notes, and I'm just have we confused politeness with actual social progress then? How about that?
Well, I don't really think that those two were ever the same. Well, so as far as when we talk about social progress, that I don't think they're even related. Just because you're polite to a lot of people. I mean, you always have been. When you worked in a job, you were polite to your boss. You didn't always respect him. So that's a given too. I mean, come on.
Well, it's a given, but what it is I'm just trying to get your perspective on it and where your mindset is at. That have we confused politeness, that politeness that you're talking about? Have we?
Yeah,
have
actually,
we?
the answer is,
Hold on,
then the
hold on,
answer
hold
is,
on,
yeah,
hold
go
on. The
ahead.
thing
Sorry.
is this:
Sorry.
have we confused that level of politeness with social progress? In other words, just because we're nice and we're tolerant of each other, does that mean that America's great? That we've gotten past her original sin of, and I'm just going to use it as an excuse, but as slavery, just because we don't discuss it anymore, does that mean that we have progressed past it? That's where I'm at. And that's the
Well, I
question.
mean, I don't think that discussing it is necessarily rude, you know. So, you know, whether or not you discuss it has nothing to do with whether or not you're polite. Um, you know, I mean, we're discussing slavery now, and we're all being polite.
Well,
You
sure,
know,
sure. We're
you know.
discussing it, but well,
So
let me ask you.
I think the answer is yes. I think the answer is yes, but not in the same way that you're suggesting. I think that nowadays we're starting to confuse politeness with tolerance. We're starting to think that they should be equal, just like, or you wouldn't be asking this question.
Well, the reason why I ask these questions is just for perspective. I mean,
Right,
like
right.
same thing. And if I and I'm going to cut you here because I want to throw this right at Benji. Do you think that we confuse politeness with actual social progress?
I think both you know, Asian culture, we tend to be polite, right? That's our culture. That all across the board, we tend to be polite. It doesn't mean we're kind. Sometimes that means, to answer your question, they're not sacrificing progress as a human being. It's just our nature, right? That's how we get along, right? So things like that. But when you saw society progression, it's not aligned with that right there. Just because we're polite doesn't mean social progress is level up. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that culture wise and like my people are very polite people in general, right? And it doesn't mean that we're like I'm polite, and I told my friends this all the time. My kids know this. I'm polite, but I'm not kind. This is a different thing, right? So from a society point of view, this other human being is more kinder than I am. And I actually respect that more. You are, Gordon, you guys are, you have empathy for people, right? You're a good coach. You're willing to listen, you're willing to step up. I'm not that way. I never been that way. Now, my family was never been that way. My best friend are that way, right? So yeah, you have like for you, like society progression and all that is a significant, and for my view of the world, it's not that big of a deal as long as that for me I'm being polite and do my thing, right? Whatever that is for me, right? That's all I can do because I don't have that.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to
Yeah,
say the same thing that Benji's saying.
yeah.
We're Asians, you know.
We don't have that line. We don't have that
Well,
in our view at all.
well, then let me throw this. Let me throw this
Yeah.
to the hybrid. Let me throw this to the hybrid we got here. Who can fit on both worlds? Gordon, tell me then. I mean, what do you think?
So I think my initial response regarding, do we confuse politeness with progress? And when I think of the we, I'm thinking society. I'm thinking either the US or the world at large, right? And I would say my initial response is, yeah, I think that people, if they look at politeness as a way to, say, avoid any conflict, and if they look at avoiding conflict as progress, then yeah, it can be confused as progress. But I think that politeness can be a tool. I think that politeness can be a way, as I just said, to avoid conflict. It can be a way to maybe have a difference of opinion without offending somebody, and it can also be a way to tolerate and avoid a difference of opinion because people might not have, say, the capability to articulate their difference of opinion, without getting into an all-out argument. And then it's on both ends. Like, so sometimes no matter what you say and how you say it, the other person might perceive it in a certain way and might be ready to fight. And some people are able to have a decent conversation with the difference of opinion without disrespecting each other, and some people are just not able to do that. And some people, any difference of opinion creates conflict, and they can't handle somebody thinking differently than they do, maybe, if that all makes sense.
Yeah. Let me add to that. This is the conversation. I was watching this show, like George Bush's daughter, she's got a talk show or something like that. One of the shows, she interviewed her dad, Barack Obama, Clinton, and all those guys. One of the things that was really cool about that is when they put all these people together, they have differences, but they're very polite to each other because they were president before. And I thought it was unique because can you imagine, like, you got the strong personality and all three of them talking politely to each other without arguing, I promise you put like Trump in there, it won't happen that way. He's not polite, right? So there's an advantage to that politeness, especially at that level, right? So for me, after I listen to that, I have a great hope for America, right? Because I know like things are tough right now and all this stuff, but ultimately at the end of the day, if there's a better game somewhere else in the world, I would have gone there, but it's not. This is still the best board for me, for my lane, in my view. Okay,
so my question, Benji, is that show you watch, is that pretty recent?
Yeah, it was a few weeks ago. I think she's doing all the interview for all the ex-president, 4 of them, I believe, and then they're gonna put it on like the History Channel or something like that. And she's the daughter of George Bush Jr. And it was really, really thoughtful interview because she was there, during the transition of Miss Obama and stuff like that. They had great story together, and they have great respect. And Clinton was, he always been articulate, and he was gentle and he was kind. And he humble a lot, right? He looked like he aged the most of everybody, right? And he was the youngest, but it was brilliant to hear that and to hear him talk about hope and possibility. And I didn't vote for Clinton, but I'm like, this guy is great because he's going to level us up, and that's what we got to talk about, because everybody's hurting. Every single one of us here in America is hurting. But we have to have that leadership and say, okay, just like John F. K., right? Level up, do what you can do for your country, not the other way around. Step up, man up, woman up, do whatever you got to do. Things are not that easy, but this is what we're here for. If you think you can find a better board somewhere else in the world, go. Don't. I'm not going to hold you down, but ultimately, though, I'm here. I'm all in, because my father, especially my stepfather, died for this country, and it's like, it was a big deal, and that's why I always honor the people that went to the war and things like that. So yeah, I'm that way. But Sam, this is not a perfect place. You know that. Come on.
Oh, no, of course. My whole thing is, we want to talk about things. That's all. That's the whole thing. I want to talk about, because there might be someone who might listen and sit back and hear the way that Robin explains it, or the way that Gordon explains it, and understand it, or have never understood outside of themselves that someone else experiences that thing. So with that being said, here's a question I want to ask right here, and I'm going to start with myself. What experiences helped you better understand people different from you? Now, I'm going to start off by saying, being a military brat and living overseas, first and foremost, that was a big one. 13, 14 years old, living in Hiroshima. I'm 6 foot, taller than everybody around me in my class, and they think I'm a Marine. That gave me a very unique perspective. I just was tall and gangly. I learned to respect people a lot more because I felt out of place, and I didn't feel like I was the dominant society, as I mentioned earlier. I felt way like a fish out of water. So with that being said, and I'm gonna bring this back to you, Robin. I mean, I know you've lived, obviously you speak Mandarin and you mentioned being in Korea. But what experiences helped you better understand people different from you?
Well, I had a very similar experience that you had as far as growing up overseas, because I did go. I was the only Caucasian kid. In fact, I was the only non-Chinese kid in a school with 3,000 students. And so they were all Chinese. This is not we're not talking about a diverse society here. Okay. The Indians went to the Indian school, the Chinese went to the Chinese school, and the Malays went to the Malay school, and the overseas people went to the American or the English. There was no American school. They went to some English school,
International
and
schools.
international schools. But my father decided, and my parents, my father and my mother decided that the best school would be the Chinese school. And I did not even speak Chinese when they threw me in there. They threw me into first grade. And naturally, when you're 5 or 6 years old, you pick up the language fairly quickly. You don't even remember, but I mean, it started out kind of harsh. And so I would say the opposite happened to me, because growing up in an environment like that, there is it's a very racist society. And it's not so much that say you're different, so we're going to treat you poorly, but you're different, but we're going to treat you differently. And so there was not an acrimony towards me, but there was always a sense of, no, you're different. You're not going to get this, or you're going to do that, and so what that taught me at the time, and it was taught me at the time, was that it's okay to treat different people differently. So it was a bad lesson, and I had to overcome that over time. And what taught me eventually to overcome that was, in fact, literature. Because you just asked the previous question, politeness and tolerance. Well, that's all over literature. That's everywhere. That's thousands of years old. I mean, Homer wrote about that in the Odyssey and the Iliad. When, if you remember the movie Troy, when the king, when Achilles kills the son of the king of Troy goes and says to him, "Hey, we're enemies, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be polite." Right? I mean, that's the core of Western civilization, the core of Western culture, and it's over 3,000 years old. So we've been like that ever since, and just because young people forget that and need to be reminded by old parts like us, it doesn't mean it's not part of us. It's not just Asians, although Asians tend to stick to it a little bit more because we tend to be more polite. And so when you say, what taught me to think that, that people, to understand people and to reach out to more people, one of the biggest things that I heard one time was an interview with Maya Angelou. And this is obviously before she died. And I think it was, I can't remember who it was who interviewed her, but it was somebody who said, well, I could never understand the Black experience. There's no way, because I'm white, and there's no way, it was a white interviewer, says there's no way as a white person I could ever understand the Black experience in America and how difficult it must have been, right? And he's trying to be humble about, there's no way, because I've never walked in your shoes. And Maya Angelou says, well, that makes me very sad, because that's what the fuck white literature is all about. I ain't writing about the slave experience for other Black people. They already know it sucks. Right? This is the reason she got the Nobel Prize in literature, is to write so that, in a way that, privileged white upper class, the lucky of us who have no slave background and no prejudice background and no racist, against us, the guys on top can understand their experience. That's the whole point of great literature. So
Literature was what helped you better understand people different from you. That's what you would say. I mean,
you got to read about it.
Yeah. So let me jump to you, Gordon. What helped you? What experiences helped you better understand people different from you?
So I was going to say proximity. I was going to say, we are a product of our environment to some degree, right? And yes, we have a little control, a little influence, but I, as a kid growing up, my mom was very, so I guess diversity was very important for my mom. And so growing up, I was in different environments that didn't necessarily match my appearance. And so as a young kid, as I said before, I think my household was very Latino. And then getting into my, say, close to my tween, if you call it, or just before teen years, it was somewhat diverse, but at the same time, navigating school and going to school and trying to find the crowd that you fit into. The crowd that embraced me and took me in was the Samoan kids when I was in school. And then when I was 15, we moved to upstate New York. In upstate New York, the school that I went to there, which was just outside of Buffalo enough that 99% of the school was white. And there was one Mexican kid who happened to be an exchange student. So he wasn't really a native there. There was an Asian girl and there was a black kid, and everybody else was white, mostly Polish and German and things like that. And so that put me in a very different world. And I was only there for a year, and then I came back and I lived in Orange County with my dad for about a year or so. In Orange County, even though it's more diverse than that, Orange County is very different from Oceanside, where I grew up here in Oceanside. And so living in Orange County was pretty different in itself. And then coming back to Oceanside and finally finishing high school and out here brought me back to something that I was more used to. But if I wasn't placed in these other surroundings, like when I lived in upstate New York near Buffalo, even though I lived and I went to school in a community that was very white, we hung out with a family in Buffalo that put us in a very black environment. We grew up in not grew up, but we hung out in some of the projects in Buffalo, which was very, very different from where we lived outside of Buffalo, and also very different from Oceanside. Oceanside has its troubles, its gang culture and all of that, but the projects are East Coast projects are very, very different from the West Coast. And so just being moved around in these, I went to 4 different high schools. Every year of high school was a very different high school in a very different world. And so that proximity to these things happening, I think, gave me a better understanding as to the experience that other people had in this world. Because, as Robin said, somebody that's white, that's of my skin tone, even though that person said they'll never understand, I think there's just degrees of understanding. I will never fully understand the Black experience, but I can have a very strong understanding compared to somebody else that maybe grew up in like the middle of Iowa or something like that, Wyoming, or, and has never even, the only Black person they ever saw was on the internet or something like that. And so I would have a much better understanding of maybe the even the Latino culture that I'm half part of, if you want to call it that. I will never fully understand what it's like to be a brown Mexican because I won't get that treatment. Although I have been in crowds where I saw, other people being treated a certain way, and that proximity and the love that I had for those people being treated a certain way gives me an idea of maybe kind of what that felt like, right? Even though it was never that. So there's degrees of that kind of understanding, I think, and placing yourself in these very different environments will give you a better understanding, I think, than just living in the same small bubble your whole life, maybe.
This is a question I'd like to ask to come back with what you were just saying, Gordon, because you're able to navigate between two different worlds. Benji, I know before we talked about you had even talked about, and this is almost the direct parallel between you and Robin. As an Asian, you were considered a darker skinned Asian, and Robin obviously the fairer skinned Asian. So with that being said, can someone understand another perspective without abandoning their own values? I know I've seen in my community, there are some black people who feel that they're white. There are some black people who feel that they are lighter than me because of that lightness, that they have a certain higher social standing. And they will tell you that, oh man, you're this because your complexion, you're this, or you're not going nowhere because you're that, or you're that complexion, or you're that. Can someone understand another perspective without abandoning their own? I've seen plenty of people who haven't. I've seen in my community.
Yeah.
Benji?
Well, you gotta understand, my mom is white. My mom is paler than most white people. Like, I got my father skin, Filipino, right? So I have that more of like Spanish descent. My last name is Spanish, right? So I get a little of both, but the whole thing is this, right? I don't put myself in that situation where I have all that. My focus is really to experience what I'm supposed to experience. I really don't care what other people do and think. Like, even in like what we were talking about here, you know, the thing that really saved me in this world, I work for the airline. So I got to travel everywhere, right? I got to see different people and cultures and things like that. I got to see me in New York. I got to see me in North Carolina and South Carolina in the similar, I mean, I got to see me in the full Southern accent when I was in South Carolina. I'm like, so that helps a lot, right? So the value that you're talking about is like, you know, it's kind of like in high school, everyone was taught this. I didn't care about all that. We were like, that's not what freedom for me is. My focus was freedom because I came from a culture where this is oppressed strongly, freedom of choice. For me, anything align me with that, I'm gonna like sky out of there, no matter where, right? So for me, I was lucky when I worked for the airlines. I got to meet all these diversity of people that made that choice to go for that freedom, and that was why. So me being dark skinned is actually a big deal because my mom is white as all get out, right? So it's like my stepdad, she's like me, my stepdad, and my stepdad is European, right? So yeah, I get that completely. Every place I go is that way. Like, and so it's not about that, and like we're being better than other culture and things like that. And let me put this in a caveat. I'm really bad about this because I don't like people when they act dumb, when they shouldn't be dumb, right? I get real upset about that, right? I'm like, why are you acting like an a-hole when I know you're not, right? So this is what a lot of people would do is that, like we talked about this before, right? They dim the light, right? No, don't play dumb. We're not dumb. We're educated, and just because you don't read doesn't mean you're not dumb. I mean, doesn't mean you're dumb. It just means that you have a different way of thinking, right? And you know, and I'll get to this. Travel for me was a big deal. Reading to me is a big deal. Writing to me is a big deal. Those are the things that kind of really saved me.
All right, Robin, you want to comment on that?
Oh yeah, I have two things. One is this whole thing just sparked me. I ran into a highly racist situation yesterday at Safeway. And so I'm standing in line at the checkout, and the checkout is full. So there's a line of people standing at the checkout, all white. And the checkout person sees my phone number because I typed in my phone number for my rewards or whatever, and he goes, Mr. Shen, is that name? And he asked me it's like, is that Italian or something like that? And I said, no, it's Chinese. And he says, and then I guess he had taken some Chinese lessons, and so he says, well, let me try out my Chinese, and he said, thank you in Chinese, and I said, oh, you're welcome, and your Chinese is very good, like most polite Chinese people say, because even though, and it's utterly never true, Your Chinese is never really good, and your pronunciation is always horrible. But we always say, "Oh yeah, that's really good." See, then she's laughing. It's like, yeah, we all say that, and we never mean it. And so the guy says, "Well, how did you learn Chinese? Did you grow up speaking it? Whatever?" And everybody was so intrigued with that. And I said, "Well," and he says, "I've been taking some Chinese lessons, and my sister's taking Chinese lessons." And I was like, "It's pretty much a useless language. I'd trade it all for Spanish in a heartbeat, right? Like this. If you said, would you trade your ability to speak Mandarin for Spanish?" And they go, "Really? Spanish?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I challenge you to find somebody who speaks Mandarin that doesn't speak perfectly good English. And good luck trying to get any of them to mow the lawn. And with AI, I don't need them to fucking write any code anymore. So, there's no reason to learn. And what's interesting is everywhere in Palo Alto and where I live, sending your kids or getting a Mandarin tutor for your kid is like is all the rage now. It's like really fashionable. Utterly useless fucking waste of time to learn to speak Mandarin, because I speak Mandarin absolutely fluently, and the number of times I speak Mandarin to anybody is probably about twice every 10 years. And I never need to. It's only just to demonstrate that I can. But I can walk outside my door right now, and I guarantee there is a great need for me to be able to speak Spanish to the people who are working this ranch, growing my food, right? And doing everything that I'm not willing to do. And I have a difficult time communicating with them because I speak Mandarin instead of a useful fucking language like Spanish. Right? So the fact that nobody in that line, they were all wanted to learn Chinese, and not a single one of them gave a shit about the most important language in that particular area of Half Moon Bay, California. You need to be able to speak Spanish. And if you don't speak Spanish, your life is impoverished, as is mine. Like I don't speak Spanish. I can order a burrito to go. That's about it, right? So that's one issue. And then the other thing about the light skin, dark skin thing, I kind of like to set the record straight about Asians and skin color. When the Westerners went to China and they started noticing that the Asians preferred lighter skin, in their arrogance, they thought it's because they want to be more like them. They want to be more European. And I like to set the record. It has nothing to fucking do with that. Asians wanted to have light skin long before they ever met a fucking European. And the reason is because if you got dark skin, you got it by working out in the sun, and that made you a peasant. And if you had light skin, that's because you spent all your days indoors reading and writing, and that made you a scholar. And you didn't get sunburned, and you didn't get suntanned. It had nothing to do with whether or not we think light skin or dark skin is better looking or whatever, right? That's just all there is to it, right? But when the Europeans got there, they're like, "Oh, they want to be light skinned like us." I'm like, "No, I didn't like you. They don't want to be more like you, you moron. We don't want to look like we're farmers." And that's all there was to it. So you see all these, right? So you see all the farmers working, and if you actually go to Vietnam and Southeast Asia in particular, where there's a lot more sun, you see all the workers out there, and they cover up so they don't get sunburn, they don't get suntan. That's all there is to it. They protect their skin, right? Not because they want to be white, right? Okay. I mean, if I want to be white, I just forget how to do math.
That was a low blow there, Robin. That was a little too low there, buddy.
You want to be racist? I can be racist.
You know what? That's a good story. I forgot about that. Robin is right. That's actually a story they told us as well too. It's like, you're dead on. And it's no different than your culture, Sam. It's like, when people look at us, that dark skin, we're outside, we work in the farm and all this. If we're light skin like my mom, she's in the house. She's well groomed. She's a princess. So it's the same thing. It's no different. And
it carries with it. It carries with it a little bit of prejudice in there too. Because what's wrong with being a peasant? Those guys grow our food. I can do without another scholar, right? You can cut the numbers of PhDs in half, and I wouldn't notice. But you lose some farmers, and we can starve.
Exactly. And this is back, remember Sam, I told you what are the other driving factor for me? Remember they said to me, you're born a peasant, you're going to stay a peasant. I fought her off that day. Not going to happen that way. Just because my skin is brown, just because I have dyslexic, none of that stopped me. That was the will that she gave me. So that was the story I gave her to tell me, because that drive me. That and the yellow trailer. It's like, I literally remember this conversation. I was maybe like 6, 7 years old. You're born a peasant. You're going to stay a peasant. So that was,
that still to this day hurts me, Benji. I'm telling you, when you said that, I don't know how long when you first told me that one hit me. Like, I mean, man, you know, they've talked about blacks being slaves, but to hear it come from your point of view, and having your mother say that to you.
Well, and see, that's the sad part too, because, you know, the real question is, what's wrong with being a peasant? Right? I mean, that actually planted the seed in Benji's mind, which he's overcome now, that there's something wrong with being a farmer and growing everybody's food.
And that's a fair statement. That's a very fair statement. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, it's like my grandfather was that way, and he was happy and he was noble. My stepfather is like that and noble. And like, I'd rather be noble than what it is today, right? You know, these are things I've learned now. Like, you know what? It's okay. I would rather choose to be noble than that, right? To be that drive and all that. But that's what I'm saying. But those lessons was for me. You know, that was something that I was like. But like Sam, for me, I don't care how you cut it, man. That hurt. You know, especially your mom saying that to you. It just hurt.
well, here's a question we got here from the audience here from Jerome Harris. It says, Benji, did you achieve in spite of her?
Yeah, of course, because that's part of my drive, right? Of course. That's of course. That was my driving force no matter what. And this is why I don't allow when society mistreat like me and things like that. I was like, if you don't want my money, good. I'll go to Four Seasons all day long. Simple as that. Because people like that do not deserve my time and my value and my energy. So people that deserve it, they'll open the door. That's the reason I say, if you don't want me in your game, I don't care. I'll create a new game. So let's talk about the real world situation. Like you know, like the NFL, you got to play like these guys are auditioning for the NFL. You know, that quarterback, that quarterback, you know, things like that. I'm sitting here going, you know, they don't want you there. If I were you, go find some other board to play. Go do something else. They don't want you there. So for me, I was that way, you know, because if you want to be in the NFL and you don't qualify, like you don't fit that mold, and you can't make yourself fit that mold. You were born in this particular way. So things like that to me, this is like, Dallas is like this, like Fort Worth's like this. There's certain restaurant I still can't go without a white person next with me because of that reason. You go to TCU area, like, you know, this is supposed to be like, you know, elite school. This restaurant I can't go into without like a white person with me.
I hear that. Any final words you got to say? We about come to that hour. Gordon, you have any comments to say to close out?
No, I'm good. I'm just listening and taking it in, trying to learn.
I will definitely say this much, Robin. Your perspective of saying that, obviously it's not a perspective, it's a lived experience, because both you and Benji have experienced that that whole is that word properly to say, kowtowing to Mandarin Chinese or non-Chinese speaking individuals. There's a lot of fakeness going on with that, huh?
Well, I don't know, it's just fake. It's just polite. I mean, you know, like, here's the thing. Like, I'll play. I've been trying to learn to play the violin, right? When I play the violin, everybody says, "Oh yeah, you sound great." I'm like, okay, well, I got tickets to my next concert. You want to buy some? Oh, fuck no. Right? You know. You know, I mean, you know, that's just, you know, I mean, come on, they're, you know, the old days, they were just called, you know, be polite and be, you know, just, you know, there's no reason to sit there and go, well, you sound like shit, right? I mean, you know, and sometimes people will try to couch it like, well, you sound pretty good for somebody who's just a beginner or some shit like that, you know. But that's all they mean. I mean, nobody means anything really, you know. It's not we're not trying to, you know, we're not trying to hoodwink you or try to get something past you. Like, it's not some evil, like, oh, you speak Mandarin pretty well, you sound great, you know. You know, it's an encouragement, you know, because you know, if you sit there and you say you sound like shit, maybe the guy won't bother trying to learn the rest of it, you know. So I mean, you know, come on, you have kids, you know, you sit there and you go, oh, hey, you did really well. Okay, are you going to give her a job? No, she's 7, right? You know, you don't tell them they suck, right? Not if you want them to improve. I mean, come on, you know.
Well, okay. Well, with that being said, another hour has came and went. I do want to give you this final notice before we go. I'm sorry, I'm trying to change this format and I'm having problems with my buttons. With that being said, a lot of people think understanding means agreement. It doesn't. Real understanding begins when you stop trying to win and start trying to see. Because communities don't fall apart simply because people are different. They fall apart when people stop trying to understand each other at all. That being said, thanks for being here, and we appreciate you. We'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.